Hey, this is Jared Kraus, host of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And in this episode, I speak with founder of Onfolio, Mr. Dom Wells. Now, Dom has a seven-figure portfolio of website businesses where he's bought multiple website businesses himself, and he helps his clients grow their website businesses too. Now, in this episode, we dive in and we talk about what affiliate website owners actually do wrong and what you need to look at when buying affiliate sites. We also talk about how to break down and do research and due diligence on particular websites, what to look out for when buying these websites, how to stay away from cookie cutter websites, which means websites that are very easily replicable and probably already have been replicated before. You definitely don't want to buy those. And then we talk about a very important subject, which is the difference between buying a cheap website versus buying a valuable website. So if you're looking to buy websites, make money, and get that passive income online, be sure to go away and listen to this powerful episode with Mr. Dom Wells. So, hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Buying Online Businesses podcast. And today, I'm very grateful I get to speak to Mr. Dom Wells, founder of Onfolio Co. Thank you so much for coming on, Dom.
Thanks a lot for having me. Really looking forward to this.
Yeah, me too. And I know that we're going to dive deep into something awesome. I'm not sure what it is yet. I've got a few things I want to ask you, but for everybody listening, if you haven't done some research on Dom, please do so. He's got quite a portfolio of websites himself, and he also helps people grow a portfolio of websites themselves, where they take over and manage people's website businesses and help them grow, whether you're just wanting more time or a more passive sort of investment. Really cool to stumble across that recently, Dom, and see what you guys are doing over there. It's quite awesome. And you've done quite a few deals yourself, Dom. And I wanted to ask you, what is, your favorite type of website business model to buy, run, and grow?
Good place to start. I think for me personally, my favorite is content websites, which could be affiliate websites, could be just sites that are monetized with display ads like Google AdSense or one of the better paying networks, or it could sell info products or to some extent have services as well. But essentially the basic way they work is they have blog posts and articles, and people find them through those articles as opposed to like coming to the homepage directly. And we prefer them to, say, drop shipping sites or general e-commerce sites, mostly because it's where we've always worked. So there's a degree of just making sure we're in our circle of competence. But also, I think they're just easier to run. They're easier to scale. You don't have things like customer support to worry about like you do with e-commerce, and you don't have inventory or they're a lot less cash intensive. The only money you really need is for SEO and content, and even then it's nowhere near as much as you'd need if you were dealing with e-commerce. So yeah, generally that's where we operate.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's what I've seen. And that's what I'm leaning towards myself personally. I want to get into the content space where I have bought, drop shipping businesses where I've got money in marketing and things like that. So with knowing that, once you buy a website, which is what everybody who's listening to this podcast is looking to do, is make some passive income from buying a site. Dare say and my clients especially really want to grow the business they've just bought. So say they've bought a content site, where would be the first sort of place to spend their time and efforts and energy and maybe even a little bit of money? And I know you mentioned some SEO and producing content, but what would you say would be like an overall general type strategy for somebody with either, a blog post content site or an affiliate type site?
It depends on their skills and maybe their experience, but the safest answer would be just with adding more content, because it's a very low risk way of growing a site. Like some of the other ways you can grow a site would be to do more SEO, some backlink building, maybe do some on-page SEO, some tweaks to the actual articles themselves. You can try and do some conversion rate optimization, or try and add in a new monetization method. But with those ones, there's always a risk that you can mess something up in the process. Whereas adding new content, there's almost nothing that could go wrong. The only real thing that could go wrong is keyword cannibalization, where maybe you have an article that ranks for a particular keyword, and then you add another article to the site which closely targets that keyword, or maybe accidentally, and Google isn't sure which of your articles to rank. So that can kind of mess up your existing rankings if you do that. But aside from that, there's pretty much nothing that can go wrong. And if you're buying an established website, it's likely in a position where pretty much any new article you add is going to perform well. Because if the site doesn't perform well, then you're probably not going to be buying it in the first place. So it's a very low risk way of just growing the traffic. And then when you grow the traffic, you're probably going to grow the income as well. And it's something that you don't really need to have a lot of sophistication to be able to do.
So that's awesome. So we're talking about keyword cannibalization that can, it can really affect, if we're going to create new content. But Dom, would you say that it would be wise to say, if you're buying a website that already has like a lot of blog posts, say hundreds of blog posts, do you feel it would be important to go through a fair bit of that content to ensure that you don't go away, and when creating new content, you actually end up duplicating content?
Yeah, absolutely. Because not only for keyword cannibalization issues, but also because of duplicate content can lead to issues in itself. Too much duplicate content could get you a penalty as well. And then also, you don't want to waste your money by creating articles that your site already covers. So it absolutely makes sense to just go through your site, and hopefully it doesn't have thousands of articles already, and just familiarize yourself with the content before you choose what other content to add. And a really good way of doing that, if you have access to a tool like Ahrefs, you can just enter your own site into Ahrefs, and they give you a list of competing domains, which they basically determine to be other sites that cover enough similar topics as your site that they would be deemed as competitors. And then you can take those competing domains, and there's another section in Ahrefs called Content Gap. And you can basically say to Ahrefs, show me all the content that my competitors rank for that I don't rank for. So that's kind of the content gap. And then Ahrefs is just going to go away and give you like a list of usually hundreds of keywords. And that's a really good starting point for which topics to add to your site, because they're kind of on topic and you haven't covered them already.
Yeah, such a powerful tool Ahrefs is. And affiliate, so coming to, and let's say we stick with affiliate sites and affiliate marketing. I noticed that, you've mentioned previously in some of your other content that it can be hard for people to sort of understand affiliate sites and affiliate marketing, and how it actually, how to grow them, and making sure they do it the right way. What are some of the things that make it hard for people to understand how to do this with affiliate sites?
Yeah, I think understanding the general concept of affiliate marketing is pretty simple. Like, you write an article where you maybe review some products, people find that article, they buy those products based on your recommendation, and you receive a commission. That's fairly simple to understand. I think where people sometimes struggle or don't see the bigger picture is really thinking about how that process happens. So where is the customer or the potential website visitor in their journey? And I see a lot of beginners writing content where maybe they're trying to put a product recommendation in a place where it's not really suitable. Like maybe the article is I don't know, like how to clean your water filter, and so that would be a good article to just get information and maybe link to some of your more buyer intent articles like best water filter or something like that. But you'll see this article and people have just kind of stuffed product recommendations in the article, and they might say, hey, you should buy this, and or their sidebar is filled with recommendations. And if you kind of put yourself in your visitors' shoes, they're probably not really interested in seeing that at that point in time. And so you're not going to get many sales, and you're also probably going to put people off from exploring your site more because they just think it's not like a particularly valuable site. And I think the same thing happens with trying to get email subscribers as well. I was on a site yesterday about tennis rackets. And when I visited the site, so there's an article which was like tennis racket reviews or best tennis rackets or something like that. And when I visited the site, there was a pop-up almost immediately, like an email opt-in pop-up that said, get this guide to never buying the wrong tennis racket again. And I just remember thinking, who's going to sign up to an email list just to buy a tennis racket? Like they can just read this article or read another article, go to a sports shop and buy a tennis racket. It's not that complicated a process. So I felt like maybe a better thing that the person could have done would have been maybe an ebook about 10 ways to improve your tennis swing or your serve or your forearm or something like that. So it's not, maybe it's not the best example, but it kind of represents to me why some people seem to be missing a trick or missing exactly what their visitors are really looking for when they're just showing them various promotions.
No, I think it's perfect explanation because really when you put somebody or when I put myself in that possible purchaser's shoes, I'm like, it's just the user-friendly design of a site like that is like, yeah, all right, I come in and you want my email straight away for something that's not valuable. And then it's just, being an obstacle in the way to me really finding out what I want to find out, which is the answers that are in the article. And then I come and read this article and I'm like, well, you're trying to sell me 3 different tennis rackets and then 2 other ones on the sidebar. And you're going in for the hard sell. Like, I feel that just, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dom, I feel that just destroys trust almost immediately when the hardest thing to gain and what you want to gain as a website owner or a business is trust from the user or the possible customers. So would you say it's just a lot of that's user design stuff as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of further to your point, this article as well, like when it has its 3 or 5 or whatever tennis racket reviews, under each tennis racket in the list, it just says buy now, and it's just got a button and you click it and it goes to Amazon. And going through that, if you're really wanting to know which one to buy and you're doing some information research, you're not going to click on any of those buttons. Whereas if the button said view what other customers are saying, and you click on it and it goes to Amazon testimonials, like not testimonials, like customer reviews on Amazon, then you're on Amazon now. The person's got your cookie, you've got their cookie, I mean, and then maybe you're going to buy from Amazon, maybe you're not, but at least like it's a much more natural way of getting people to click your affiliate links, rather than just, yeah, like you say. And then when you see that and you see it say Like if you see an article that says read other customer reviews here, you're going to think, oh, that was helpful. Whereas if it just says order now, you're probably going to hit the back button and go read another article because you don't trust this one anymore.
Yeah. And mate, yeah, that's a crazy thing that people are just going so hard for the sell that it really, like, even if on Facebook or wherever it is like, just get them, they're trying to rush people through the process, I guess. Is that something that you see that's done wrong, where people don't want to be rushed when they're going to spend $200 on a tennis racket? Like, they kind of want to just take their time and not just go, cool, let's jump straight from this, little article to boom, I'm going to try and spend $200. I think it takes a little bit longer for somebody to really make a great decision on what tennis racket to buy. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. I think there's a sweet spot where maybe if the product is only like $50 or less than 100, maybe you can get away with that. I still think that it should be done in a more tactful way. But maybe in that situation, someone is probably going to make a quick purchase where they just read an article, go to Amazon or wherever, and then they buy it. But you're not going to do that with like a fridge or like something way more expensive. So that's definitely something that needs to be considered as well.
Yeah. And so let's talk about buying some of these sites. Now, say you come on and you find a site, and it could be on either one of the marketplaces or it could be from a website broker. And I know that you're quite familiar with a lot of the brokers and spoken to them and done some stuff with them. Now, say you're coming to buy a site and you've bought multiple businesses yourself, and some people buy businesses and then come to you and want a growth sort of strategy or a portfolio manager. What are some of the things that you would, in your opinion, would be looking out for when you're buying either an affiliate site or any other site for that matter, like these kind of red flags?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I look at sites kind of two stages as well. Like the first one is I do look out for the red flags or green flags, just signs of stability, and that the listing is what it's made out to be. And then the second thing I look for is site opportunity and growth potential. So I think the first thing where a lot of people go wrong is not viewing those as two separate things, and they maybe overlook a red flag because they get excited about an opportunity, or they tolerate a red flag because they get excited about opportunity. So the first thing is to just look at those in isolation. And then, so when you're on that first stage and you're thinking, okay, what should I be wary of? The first thing I look at is the traffic, and I want to look at the traffic history. So I'll never buy a site if there's no traffic history. Most of them, it's very rare you'll see one for sale without traffic history, so it's not really a problem. But whether you're looking at, say, Flipper or Empire Flippers, FE International, I always look at the traffic history, because a lot of sites, particularly recently, since like the August 1st update last year, when a lot of sites tanked, I want to see if the site is still at its kind of average, because maybe you get a site where so that maybe they're using like a 12-month history, and for the first, say, 7 months of the year, it was getting 200,000 page views a month, and maybe it was making, say, $4,000 a month. And then in August, it got a Google, not a penalty, but the algorithm changed and it lost its traffic. So now it's gone down to, say, 50,000 page views a month and 2,000 profit per month. So they'll use the 1 year history and they'll say, well, it did 4,000 for half the year and 2,000 for half the year. So they'll say this site's making $3,000 a month because that's the average. And the truth is it's not. It's making $2,000 a month, and it's not likely to go back to 3 because the algorithm's changed and its traffic's fallen off a cliff. So for me, whether I'm on Flipper or a broker, that's usually the first thing that makes me close the tap, because there's quite a lot of sites where I look at it and I see that and I think, okay, like this one's not exactly accurate. Now, if they've discounted all the stuff before the dip and they say this site's making $2,000, then suddenly it's okay. You can look at it and think, well, it's had a traffic dip, but it seems to be stable now, and I'd be buying it based on where it's at now, so that's okay. And then if you're on Flipper, you have some even more basic stuff you need to do, where you just need to make sure the traffic is real. It's not like bot traffic. It's not coming from like, I don't want to call out any particular countries, but there are some countries that send a lot of spam traffic. So you've got to make sure the traffic's not coming from there. So just make sure it's like US or UK or any kind of, if it's an English language website, any like Australia or Canada. Those are like the big four. You don't really have to do that as much with brokers, because brokers tend to do that for you. So that's good. And I guess some of the ways you can spot the traffic's fake is maybe the time on page is like 1 second, the bounce rate is 99%, a lot of direct traffic rather than traffic from search engines, and Google Analytics will tell you all of this stuff. And then after traffic, I might look at, I'll actually look at how the traffic is split. So I bought a site before where I think something like 80% of the traffic went to one page. And luckily nothing bad ever happened, but I realized later that that was a huge risk, because if that one page lost its ranking in Google, that's 80% of the traffic that could vanish. Whereas I bought another one where I think the biggest page got 1%. So the traffic was spread really, really nicely among loads of pages. So that's a much better sign of stability, because you can lose 1 or 2 pages ranking and it barely makes a dent in your total traffic. And then the same for income as well. You want to make sure, sometimes the traffic may be very nicely diverse, but the income still maybe comes from like 3 or 4 pages. And again, that's a bit of a risk. So to the extent that you can tell, because some people just use single tracking IDs for their entire site, so you might not know exactly which pages are generating the sales, but as far as you can tell, you should try to check that the income is diversified as well. And then things like backlink history and backlink quality, and probably can't really go into too much depth on a podcast, but you want to make sure that there's no shady backlinks or spammy or like a huge amount of backlinks being dropped recently, or any kind of sign of like scholarship links, which is either, it means the site's either being penalized or it's about to get penalized. Things like that. And then that's really the bulk of it. Like if a site passes all of those, then other red flags may really depend on each individual site. Like, how's it making its money? Are there any red flags there? Like, is it making a lot of its money from ad sales? So like sponsored ads, sponsored posts, they can be a lot harder to replicate than, so AdSense, for example, Google AdSense or Mediavine or AdThrive, those ones are fairly consistent and I have no issues buying a site with them. But when you have a site that most of its money comes from sponsored ads, or like people paying every month for like $300 for a sidebar, I find it's quite easy for those sort of adverts to dry up. And it's a lot easier for them to be kind of lied about as well. So you need to dig a lot deeper there and find out if the advertisers are actually legit and they are actually, they're not going to suddenly stop paying for whatever reason. Like, you know, maybe a site got someone to sign up for 6 months for $100 a month, but then you buy the site when that's 6 months up and the person doesn't want to renew just because whatever reason. Yeah, so there are a lot of these kind of case by case things that you want to look at as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really business model by business model, really. But those key things are the bulk on every business, where you've got sites that you need to check the traffic on every one of them. You need to check the income and the financials on every one of them. You need to check the SEO on every single one of them, and they're so darn important to understand that, all right, has it been affected? The traffic, say, for example, has it been affected? And what does that mean for the future of the business? Now, just because you've got 12 months of good history doesn't mean it's still valued or that. And I noticed that you said mostly all sites now have, traffic, verifying of traffic. Whereas I know years ago that when you could get on different marketplaces like Flipper or whatever, there were people who just said, oh yeah, I'm sorry, but I don't have Google Analytics linked up to my website. And that's something to definitely be wary of, for sure.
Yeah, I think sometimes someone doesn't have analytics connected, and it doesn't necessarily mean they're a scammer. But for me, I just think there's so many other sites out there that do have it connected. I'm just gonna, I don't have a finite amount of money, so why would I take a punt on this one when there's others that are more verifiable?
Yeah, why make it hard for yourself, right?
Yeah.
And it's the same. I want to talk to you about cookie cutter websites, because I've seen a lot of cookie cutter websites as well. And mainly not on the brokers, because the brokers, like we say, like I've spoken to a lot of the brokers now, and they come on podcasts, and we know how well they vet the businesses, because they have a reputation they want to uphold, and they don't just want to sell businesses and get really bad case studies for that. And sometimes that's inevitable. Sometimes a business can tank, and that's why we need to be good at researching due diligence. But, there are some places with marketplaces where you've got cookie cutter websites where you see anybody can come in and look at these different businesses that are using this business model and selling this type of product, and it's available for everybody to see without them having to sign a NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement for everybody listening. And then it's easy for people to just replicate those businesses, let alone other people that do sell those businesses are selling, cookie cutter sites. So, Dom, how would you determine what a cookie cutter website is, and how would you detect one of those?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually, way back in 2013, when I started Human Proof Designs, I did that because I was sick of seeing people buying these cookie cutter websites off Flipper, which no fault of Flipper or anything. Like they're just a marketplace. But there were sellers on there who would sell the same website over and over again, just a different domain name, and they'd make all these outrageous claims about how much money it was making, and people were buying them. And I saw that there was clearly a need in the marketplace, in the market, for people to get new starter sites, but just not like, BS cookie cutter ones. So at the lower level, like the kind of $500, maybe even $200 range, cookie cutter websites are fairly easy to spot, because they generally don't have any traffic or anything, and they likely never will get traffic, which is why they're a waste of money. So the reason the easiest way to check actually is just to visit the website and just copy and paste various paragraphs into Google, because a lot of these sellers, they literally just change the domain name, so the content is identical, and you can just copy like a paragraph from the homepage or one of the articles, paste it into Google, and you'll find like 7 or 8 other sites that have the same paragraph, and you click on them and they're almost identical, just the names changed and maybe the themes changed slightly. And those ones are just never going to rank anywhere because they're just copies of other sites. So I like, one of the beauties of buying established content sites is generally they're harder to copy, because when they're an SEO play, so all of their income is based around them ranking highly in Google and getting traffic from Google and then monetizing that traffic, it's a lot harder for someone to copy them. Like they can copy the idea and build a similar site, but they can't necessarily succeed with it because it's going to take them like 6 months to a year to get that site bringing in traffic. So one way to avoid it is to just move up the food chain and buy bigger sites. And then I guess one of the reasons I'm always wary of buying sites that make money from paid traffic is because I feel like the actual seller, yeah, they could sign a non-compete, but they could easily just copy the funnel, just do the same Facebook ads that they were doing before, or another person could see the listing and not buy the site and just reverse engineer that site with Facebook ads or social media posts or whatever that site is doing successfully. So for me, the more sort of defensible the site is in terms of whether it has a brand or just in how long it would take for someone to replicate the traffic, that's the best way really to avoid picking up on one of these like copycat cookie cutter sites.
Yeah, or even if it's not a cookie cutter website, one that is something that is just going to be easily replicable in itself. And that's two huge distinctions there. And something that I really advocate, Dom, is that when people come to me and they say, I want to buy a site, and I'm like, okay, cool. Like what are you working with? Like, 10, 15, 40, 50, 100, 200K. And they say they want to dip their toe in the water. And I get that when you're starting something new and to invest. And I often tell them like, look, I don't feel it's really going to be worth your while spending any less than the $10,000 to $15,000 range, let alone buying something for $500,000, because it does make your life so much harder trying to buy something that could be a cookie cutter website, could be easily replicable. And yeah, a lot of people do want to buy stuff around the $2,000 to $5,000 range. And I get that because they want to dip their toe in. But I feel that the more you, like you said, not everybody has a finite amount of money, and we do want to start somewhere. But would you say it's probably better to buy something that has a bit more meat to it rather than, and wait and save a bit more money rather than just try and get in and fumble over something that may possibly work?
Yeah, I agree with you actually, and it is a tough one. Like I've had that conversation with people as well, and I get where they're coming from. Like if someone says, "Hey, I've got 100K, I have no idea what I'm doing, let's go," you're going to be like, "Okay, let's slow down a little bit there." But at the same time, if they're like, "I've got $1,000, I want to buy a site for $1,000 and then move up the ladder over time," yeah, it is a bit problematic. Not only because for $1,000 there's a lot of scammy sites out there, but it's also just $1,000's not necessarily going to teach you that much. And the more money you have, the better the business is that you're buying anyway. So the kind of irony is the more money you spend, obviously the more you're risking because it's more money, but the less of a risk it is because you're less likely to buy junk. Like I'd rather buy $1 million website than a 10K website, just because $1 million website is going to come with a team. It's going to come with established history. It's probably got oodles of traffic and loads of different monetization methods. But at the same time, most people would rather risk $10,000 than $1 million. So it is it's a tough one. And I think you've probably found the sweet spot by saying start with like 10 to 15K.
Yeah, that's because when I first came to this, I was like, all right, I want to get in. I was like, I don't want to spend any more than $2,000 here. And I was like, well, after doing a lot of research and due diligence, I realized that it was more risky to buy something on a lower end. And not everybody I agree. I'm same boat as you. I'd rather buy $1 million website with a team because the team can teach me so much about the website without having to do just a three-time phone conversation with $1 million listing. You do get more hours of training, but you've got so much there to build from, and it's just, I feel it's less risk and a much smarter approach. But if you don't have $1 million, save up as much as you can and buy something at least over the 10 to 15. And when you start, you build it up a little bit, you can sell another one, or you can sell that after 2 years, and then you can buy a bigger one for maybe 50K, and then buy a 100K one, and keep growing until you get to that price range where you do have just one or two businesses, both with teams, and it can be a more passive model. So one thing that I kind of want to end on, Dom, is that, sometimes people do make some mistakes when they have bought a website, and they just rush in and they want to grow it. And I've done this before myself, and I haven't really listened and sat down and taken the wise approach. What are some of the common mistakes you see people make when they buy their first listing? They're seeing dollar signs coming in and they're getting excited and they're like, I want to grow this thing. What are some of the key mistakes people make, and what do you think everybody listening should learn from this so they don't do it themselves?
I think maybe going back to some of the things I said earlier, certainly the biggest mistake I've made is assuming that I'm going to be able to improve a website to some extent. Like, I'm going to improve the funnel, I'm going to improve the marketing. Like, quite often you see a site, like, let's say it's getting hundreds and thousands of visits and it's making $3,000, and you think, oh, I could easily get that to 10, or like, all I need to do is change the email funnel, or I can, the page is really ugly, I'm going to improve the conversions and stuff like that. And you absolutely should try to do all of those things. But I think where people make the mistake is maybe buying a bad site or paying a bad price for a site under the assumption that they'll be able to pull those things off. Because these days I assume I won't be able to pull them off, because then if I can, that's great bonus. But if I can't, then if I still buy the site knowing that it's a good deal, even though I can't achieve any of those improvements, then I'm okay. Because, like, maybe you buy a site it's making $2,000 a month, and you pay like, I don't know, 60 to 70 grand for it. If you can grow it, then yeah, fantastic, do that as much as you can. But if you can't grow it, you're still probably going to get around a 30 to 40% ROI that year, just maintaining its income. Whereas the mistake I think people make is they do just kind of overlook some issues that sites have. So I've bought a site before thinking I would improve it. Not only did I not improve it, but the site lost like its income probably halved, because there were some things about the site that were not that good. The traffic wasn't, there was a lot of Pinterest traffic that wasn't as stable as I expected. The content was not spammy, but it was kind of not very good. Like, I wouldn't have bought that site if I hadn't thought I could grow it. So I kind of got left holding a site where I thought, oh, I probably wasted my money a bit here. Like, the site's still making me money, but I should have bought a different site. And then I think another mistake people make is shopping around for the lower multiples a bit too much. Like I think buying a 20x site over a 30x site is great, but most of the time the site you're getting is just only twice as, like, it's not as good as the 30x site. And I've had people say to me, okay, I want help finding a site, but I'm not going to pay more than 25x for it. And I'm like, would you want me to buy you a garbage site or a good site? Because, like, if you want me to buy you a good site, then we need to look at 30 to 36x, because that's just what they go for. And 25x can be a ripoff if the site is garbage, and 36x can be a bargain if the site has a lot of potential. So I think you have to look at the multiple in terms of what you're getting for it, rather than like the raw number. Like, I think Warren Buffett said something along the lines of, like, price is what you pay and value is what you get. So there are some sites where, yeah, I absolutely would pay like 36, even 40x for them, whereas others I wouldn't touch. I don't care what it's listed for.
Yeah.
And then I think the third mistake, so just the third and final one, is people buy a site and then they don't do enough to it. So it's kind of the opposite of assuming they'll grow it. They kind of assume that they don't have to do anything. And like 6 months later, the site's kind of gone not to zero, but like it's maybe a site they bought for 50K and now it's worth 5K. And you're like, well, what did you do? And they say, well, nothing. And you're like, okay, so there's the problem. So content sites are probably one of the most passive investments out there, but they're not entirely passive. You do still need to do some work to them. So, whether that's just maintaining the content publishing frequency or just doing some basic SEO or some like maintenance stuff, like making sure the SSL certificate's updated and just basic things like that. But you can't just completely ignore it.
Yeah, for sure. Like you said, you could buy one and it might cost you 60, 70 grand and you might make a 30 to 40% return in that first year. But, just by you not doing any work in that year, your investment's going to diminish significantly. And I think Warren Buffett also says something very similar to what you did mention before, is that it's better to buy a great business at a fair price rather than buy a fair business. I forget how it goes, but yeah, a lot of these principles you're buying from Warren Buffett. He's the world's most famous investor, should I say, and he buys businesses, and that's what we're talking about here as well. So many great little tips you can get from Warren. And the biggest thing that I picked up from you, Dom, today is that be really decisive and be really good at understanding the website, understanding the value of it, and ensuring you don't just go through and change a whole lot of things. And how I feel the best to understand that is by doing really good research and due diligence if you're going to buy these businesses yourself. And Dom, I'm so grateful that you came on. You have a world of knowledge in this space. Where can everybody find out more about you?
Probably just going to onfolio.co is the best way to sort of keep up to date with reading the blog, and there's a contact form if anyone wants to get in touch with me there. So that's probably the best place to follow me.
Excellent. And everybody listening, I will put that in the show notes. And for those of you who I was talking about just before, wanting to buy these websites, first off, we need to start learning how to do our research and our due diligence. I do have some free tools. I have a website evaluator tool and a due diligence framework you can use. You can get these from my website. It's helped me make thousands of dollars and my clients thousands of dollars a month from using these tools. So head over to buyingonlinebusiness.com/free resources. For everybody listening, thank you so much. If you did like this episode, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share it. And if you did like this episode, please let me know what you liked about it by leaving a review so I can bring more of that to the show.